Hello and good evening. My name is Imraan Karolia, and this is Matric Poetry, What Examiners Want. It is now just past 7 o'clock. I see many people still logging on. I see many attendees at the moment. This is session one. It is the 30th of September 2015, 7 to 8 p.m. I'd like to welcome all of the attendees I see at the moment, just to name a few. I see Mohammed, I see Raisa, I see another Raisa, I see Amara, I see Zainab, among many, many others. And perhaps it's listed in, by the time you actually log on. But I hope this is going to be a fruitful hour. And I'm actually quite looking forward to this. This is, just something I've been working on for the past 2 to 3 weeks, putting in many hours. And, it's just all for the learners. And I'm sure many other teachers, would actually try to go the extra mile just to make sure that all learners are 100% when it comes to the actual exam. So, without further ado, I think we should begin. I'd like to welcome all of the English home learners of South Africa to the Matric Poetry What Exam Want. I don't know if it's your first webinar. I don't know, maybe it should be your first webinar. But if it is, I'd like to say congratulations for, getting all of the technical aspects sorted, and I can see all of you are sort of, like quite more people are just coming on out of 105. So what are we actually going to do in this session? In this session, I'd like to officially welcome all of the learners that we sort of see from across South Africa. It is the Matric Poetry webinars. I'll tell you more a little bit about webinars. I'll tell you all about English Paper 2. I'll tell you what markers look for when it comes to English Paper 2 and the problems with answering poetry, and that is basically the general introduction of the first webinar, this free webinar that many learners across South Africa are tuning into. Then we're going to move on to an abandoned bundle, right? I take it by now you've done a line-by-line analysis of all of your 12 NSC poems, and then I'll give you a few secrets and actually show you how to answer some of the questions. So what we're going to do now is that let me tell you a little bit more about me. My name is Imraan Karolia. I am a teacher. I teach at a school in Springs, and I've been quite sort of passionate about teaching. Sort of ended up in the teaching profession by accident, but I absolutely loved it. Qualified as a journalist, worked at Eyewitness News, worked at EWN. I'm sure you're familiar with it, especially for the Gauteng and the Cape Town listeners. EWN, Eyewitness News, I worked there. I worked at Wits Language School as a teacher, taught English foreign language, and basically have a nice range of students and just enjoy connecting with all of them on various different platforms. And, the different age groups really get me going. For those of you who are sort of like, entirely connected, I'll just show you what the setup looks like at the moment. And probably you get to see me now, and I hope all of you do get to see me. I'm coming to you live from the East Rand in Gauteng. So welcome to all of you. I think it's absolutely amazing that we get to basically share poetry and learn poetry on this platform. I'm going to turn it off for now, just regarding some data issues. Perhaps on your side, it may charge you a little bit more, but at any point, you can see the sidebar where you can actually raise your hands, you can ask some questions, and I think it will be a wonderful interaction over the next few minutes. So that's all about me. Basically, love teaching, looking at innovation, looking at basically different ways of teaching when it actually comes to teaching English. And I think, we should be quite innovative. We should be embrace technology and make use of all of these platforms that are sort of available to us. Moving on, just to tell you a little bit about a webinar, and if you look at the picture on the screen, it's exactly how the webinar should work. So you basically have one person who's controlling, you have a sound engineer, and you have many people who can tune in after getting the password. And I hope you can all see me clearly. If you look at the right-hand side, you should see a dashboard, and I'm just looking at the audience view. If you can sort of, there's a chat option. I don't know if you can see sort of the chat option. You can see that there's a poll. There are a few questions I put up if you want to sort of look at the questions. And I think it's going to be a very interactive platform. And I hope it's really coming across really, really clearly. So the thing about a webinar, and I'm just looking at the attendee list at the moment, is that we get to basically be all together at the same time in a class. So I'm looking at people from Durban, I'm looking at students from Cape Town, many of them, in fact, from Johannesburg, some from Pretoria. If you just tuned in now, just a few minutes late, I'd like to welcome you and just welcome you to the webinar and say, you know, it's just an honor to have you here. If we move on with actually, let's get down to basically what we're here for. Let's talk a little bit about English paper 2. If you take paper 1, which counts 70 marks, paper 2 counts 80 marks, and paper 3 counts 100 marks, altogether the entire exam that you probably wrote over the past few weeks with the trial exams and the upcoming final exams, is that you have a mark out of 250. Now, paper 2 counts 80 marks. And the reason why you can really improve your English mark with paper 2 is because sometimes you may not be fully aware of, for example, a comprehension that may come out in paper 1. So when it comes to actually studying poetry, poetry is actually 30 marks. If you look at it, if the novel actually counts 25 marks and the drama counts 25 marks. And so poetry, the prescribed poems that you have to do, plus the one unseen poem that you have to do, it actually counts more than what Animal Farm would on its own, or more what Othello would, or The Crucible. So it is quite important. Now, the reason why we're sort of talking about poetry, and the reason why I decided to have the poetry lessons, is because as a teacher myself, I sort of found that when learners study poetry, they're not really familiar with how to study poetry. And it's as simple as that. Many students would opt to read, right? In fact, if you click on the chat box, you can let me know exactly how you study for poetry. You may read, you may make notes. And what I'm going to uncover in this lesson is basically how to study for poetry, right? So the novel, 25 marks, drama, 25 marks, and the poetry, they're going to ask you 4 prescribed poems, one of which will be an essay, and that's usually question 1. And then the unseen poem, and a lot of the lessons and a lot of the webinars and the upcoming webinars over time will basically also uncover techniques that you can use for the unseen poem. So when we go for department meetings, following last year's final exams, for example, all of your friends who left last year, we actually do get presented a report. And the report tells us about everything that went right with last year's paper 2 and everything that went wrong with last year's paper 2. Now, some of the problems that I really want you to understand, because I believe if we're going to fix poetry and if we're going to up your mark in English, then we need to know what the problems are, because then we know what to fix. So let's look at the first one. We're talking about length of answers. If you, for example, see a 3-mark question and you only present one idea, you definitely got 33.3% for that question. Now, we're aiming for the 100%. We're aiming for the 3 out of 3, the 2 out of 2, the 4 out of 4. Another problem when it came to understanding poetry is that we don't really understand the poem. We are basically regurgitating with textbooks. And if you look at, for example, and it's also their learner's copy from textbooks, many examiners, many markers feel that there are sort of favorite textbooks that all of the markers and examiners know the ones you have are the ones we have, and it's the same ones they have, and they know exactly what's in there. And basically, you're not bringing your own ideas, and that's what they felt last year. So I'm going to teach you how to bring your own to the paper. And also, we need to focus. You cannot bring your own and be very far from the answer. Another problem: diction, tone, imagery, intention, the structure of the poem, and mood and tone. Mood and tone is sort of like probably your paper 2 in the poetry section all of the questions can be loaded with mood or tone. So we really need to understand it on its own. We need to sort of look at it not in isolation, but actually paint the picture. How does diction emphasize the poet's intention? Because if you take, for example, we're doing a band and bundle today, Mbuyiseni Oswilliam Charlie probably sat like how you're sitting in front of a computer now or in front of your mobile phone. He had ideas that went to his head. And we need to basically decipher why is it that he chose to share? Why did he choose to address certain themes in that way when there were probably a bazillion ways for him to do that? Next thing is style. And when I speak about style, it's the way we write our answers, right? Sometimes it's actually very far from grade 12 writing, right? And also a lack of knowledge of the figures of speech. Students really don't study the figures of speech, and a lack of keywords, which is going to be very, very big. And I'm basically going to explain that to you just now. So let's look at understanding the questions. How you're going to get marks, how you're actually going to get marks is we need to understand the types of questions that examiners set. Now, I don't know if this was communicated to you before, but if it isn't, it's quite important. Let's look at understanding the levels of questioning. We sort of get 5 levels of questioning. Now, the 5 levels basically caters for the ability of every single student sitting in class. Now, I'm sort of going to make it easy for you, and let's understand what are level 1 questions. Level 1 questions are basically where the answer is in the text. So, for example, a level 1 question would be, Jack and Jill went up the hill. And I ask you, matriculants joining in on this webinar, to those who are joining in, welcome. So if I ask you, Jack and Jill went up the hill, the question they're going to ask you is, who went up the hill, right? And that's it. As simple as that. Now, I want you to pay attention to level 3 questions. Level 3 questions are the ones that they usually ask in home language. So let's leave first additional, second additional, because there you get lots of level 1 and 2 questions. We're dealing with home language, right? First language, right? Home language. So the language you speak, you probably speak, and the language offered at your school. When you look at a level 3 question, the answer is in the text, but it's your own knowledge too. So if you look at your own knowledge, right? And if we're basically looking at your own knowledge, and by the way, if you're looking at the slide, I'm sort of like there right now, right? We're looking at your own knowledge. That means identify the simile in line 2, right? So your own knowledge would be what a simile is, but the identification of it would be in line 2, and that would be, your answer would be in the text, right? And that would be in the text. So if we look at level 4 and 5 questions now, level 4 and 5 questions are sort of the questions that they love asking, and this is where we speak about critical thinking. There we go. That is, what do you think? Do you agree? In your opinion, to what extent do you agree? And that's the type of questions that we really need to sort of pay attention to, because these are the type of questions that we need to know how to answer, right? We need to know how to answer. So those are some of the problems. Let's talk about what we look for as a teacher, as an English teacher. What am I looking for when I actually mark a poetry paper? There are obviously certain rules, and it's mentioned in the introduction. It's mentioned sort of like in the cover page. We're speaking about numbering correctly. Now, if you, for example, don't number correctly, we cannot give learners the benefit of the doubt. Markers in all the marking centers will not give learners the benefit of the doubt if you number incorrectly. So you may lose an entire 10 mark um, an entire 10 marks for just saying your entire question 2 is, for example, numbered as question 3.1 to 3.5, where it should be 2.1 to 2.5. Number in the middle, that's not like non-negotiable, right? Leave a line after every answer while you do number in the middle. Start each question on a new page. It really helps. It helps us organize your ideas, and it really makes the marking process a pleasure. Avoid all the margins, top, bottom, left, right. Spelling counts if it affects the meaning. What we're looking for, now I call it the RSM. Don't forget the RSM. Reason, substantiation. and motivation. Those are the three critical elements markers. So when we mark a paper, we actually looking for reason, substantiation, motivation, right? And your answers must sort of be concise and relevant, right? And if we sort of ask, for example, what is uh, um, we'll ask you a question, it's a 1 mark answer, and you basically give two options, right? In which paragraph, and you say paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, or paragraph 2 first and then paragraph 1, without like scratching out the one you don't want us to mark, right? We always credit the first responses. I want you to keep that in mind when it comes to poetry. So the most important thing at, that you're looking at on the screen at the moment is reason, substantiation, and motivation. Okay, let's move on. So what we've done so far in this session, it was the welcome. I told you a little bit about me, Matric Poetry Webinars, English Home Language Paper 2, and the problems with answering poetry. We are going to move on to poem number 1, and it is An Abandoned Bundle. And I hope you have your notebooks ready. I hope you have a pen ready because I'm going to share lots and lots of tips. Many other people joining us on the webinar, streaming in, a few latecomers, we welcome you. We welcome you to the webinar, and it's been I think it's absolutely a pleasure having you online. It's really an honor for me to be sitting here this evening and sharing a few tips, and that's all coming up right now. Let's look at An Abandoned Bundle by Mbuyiseni Oswald Charlie. Right? It says the morning mist and chimney smoke of White City Jabavu flow thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw. It smothered our little houses like fish caught in a net. Scavenging dogs draped in red bandanas of blood fought fiercely for a squirming bundle. I threw a brick. They bared fangs, flickered velvet tongues of scarlet, and scurried away, leaving a mutilated corpse. An infant dumped on a rubbish heap. Oh, baby in the manga, sleep well on human dung. Its mother had melted into the rays of the sun. Rays of the rising sun, her face glittering with innocence, her heart as pure as trampled dew. Now, I do see a few people online, and I do see a few people on the chat. You can chat to me as we sort of like go um, as we sort of continue. You can ask questions. There's a poll, the chat option. You can keep in touch with me that way. I do see Raisa, and I'm just going to unmute and see if Raisa is with us. Raisa, Raisa, are you with us? Raisa from Nigel, Raisa Suleiman. Are you with us? Hello?
Yes,
Oh, there we go. I
yes,
can
I
hear you
am.
loud and clear. How are you?
Okay, you sir?
I'm good, thanks, Raisa. Tell me, what do you think about the webinar so far?
I think it's very amazing and we're learning a lot that we didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it will help us because I really didn't know how to study poetry. And I hope that the sessions to follow will help me get better.
Mm-hmm. Raisa, I have a question for you. Let's take An Abandoned Bundle by Mbuyiseni Oswald Charlie, and it's a contextual question, and it would be probably question 2 in the final paper. My question to you is, when you look at the poem, like how you're looking at it on the screen at the moment, just tell me what comes to your mind. Are you scared? Are you sort of confident? Do you sort of connect with the words? Do you take it as a comprehension? Is it just a reading test? What do you make of the text in front of you when you're sitting in the examiner hall?
I think I'm more scared because there's a lot of words that come up in the poetry that I don't quite understand. There's a lot of new words that we're not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's a lot of fear plus the pressure in the exam. So there's a lot to me that I feel I need to still learn from the poetry.
Okay, so let me give you a quick tip while you're with me. You see Abandoned Bundle and Mbuyiseni Oswald Mchali in front. Don't just look at the words as a poem, because people sometimes don't like poetry. They create a phobia for poetry. Don't do that. The beauty of the English language is in the vocabulary, and the beauty of it sort of comes across, and sort of comes across when it And the beauty comes across when we actually connect with the words. So here's the first step. I thank you so much for talking to us. I hope you're going to stay tuned because there's lots of tips coming out and you're going to have a pen and paper ready, Raisa.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And also, if you want to chat in and if you do have a microphone with you, then please do tune in. So here's the first step for the webinar, and it goes like this. We need to understand we need to understand that we get different types of poems. Take all the 12 NSC poems that you have. We have poems about nature. We have poems about men versus nature. Now, if you speak about men versus nature, we're speaking about the contrast like we've seen on the move, for example, right? And when you talk about men and nature, right? Think about a beautiful sort of think about beautiful, luscious scenery, and you talk about buildings right next to it, right? So when we speak about men versus nature, it's going to go two ways. There's actual harmony or an invasion, like intrusion, right? Then we have poems about deep thought and emotion. I want you to think of Shakespeare when it comes to this. When it comes to Shakespeare, right? When it comes to Shakespeare, we're actually looking at the sonnets. Then we get satirical poems, and we all know that the satirical poem that's in the syllabus is In Detention. Then we get war poems, right? We get war poems, and when we speak about war poems, oh, I think there we go. You can hear me now. Sorry about that. I want you to sort of. We spoke about man and nature. We spoke about the different types of poems, African poetry, poems about love, poems about war, satirical poems, deep thought and emotion poems, poems about nature. So when we're talking about African poetry, we're basically speaking about the past. Think about colonization. Think about apartheid. Think about democracy and the moment of democracy, 1994. Think about nature. Think about Table Mountain. Think about the Drakensberg. Think about the Limpopo province, the baobab tree. Think about culture, the Indebele tribe. Think about the drums. And once you start thinking African, right, you're on your way to get your marks. So Mbuyuseni Aswald Mchali, you're going to see him probably in the unseen section. Question 5. We see him with a abandoned bundle. And you probably saw him in grade 10 and 11 too, right? So African poetry, we need to think and go back at in a time in South Africa, perhaps before democracy, because those are the most beautiful poems written. Let's look at the first two stanzas. It says, "The morning mist and chimney smoke of white city Jabavu float thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw. It smothered our little houses like fish caught in a net." Now, when you see this, please don't just look at it as a poem, something that was asked, something that was basically asked and something that you needed to study. Tip number 2 for the night. I want you to connect with the words. Connect with the words. So let's look at stanza 1. The morning mist and chimney smoke of white city Jabavu. Think about smoke. What comes to your mind? Just a few keywords that come to your mind when you think of smoke. Pollution? What else? Right? What else? Pollution, suffocation, right? Difficulty in breathing, perhaps. Let me ask you this question. What do you think of when you see the word white? Right? What do you think of? On the chat, I see some people chatting to me. What do you think of when you see white? Purity, someone says purity. That's a very good one. Purity. White city jabavu, es pus oozing. When you think of pus, people, when you think of pus, what comes to your mind? The words gigantic, the word so, smothered, little, like fish caught in a net, right? Connect with the words. Connect with the words. You know it. You've studied it. Connect with the words. And the only thing then left to do is to tell you that when you answer, whatever you think about and those keywords, and the keywords you're going to get from study guides, you're going to get from past papers, you're going to get from me in the webinars, and you basically, there are multiple sources, even websites, that's going to give you lots of keywords, which we are going to use. And this probably, I said, your answers or responses must be loaded with keywords. And that you must remember. If you remember anything from today's webinar, it is that your answers must be loaded with keywords. It must be, right? So let's look at this. I want you to look at the morning mist and chimney smoke of White City Jibaba flow, thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw. As pus oozing from a gigantic saw. Let's see if we can probably speak to someone else. I see Yusuf there. Yusuf on the line. Yusuf, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Welcome to the webinar. I really hope you're having a wonderful evening with us. Many learners from across the country. Yusuf, let's look at the first stanza. The morning mist and chimney smoke of White City Jabavu float thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw. Look at the word mist, smoke, white, float, thick, pus oozing, gigantic saw. What words come to your mind?
Pollution is all about atmosphere of pollution.
The atmosphere of pollution, right? And if you take the word pus and oozing,
Pus and oozing
where does pus come from, Yusuf?
from a saw.
From a saw, right? And is it a very pleasant sort of sight?
No.
It's absolutely disgusting, isn't it? And now
Yes.
you're not only thinking about the pus that probably dried up or that's still inside the pimple or the sore, whatever it is, but it's actually oozing out, right? It's actually oozing out. So look at the screen right now. These are the words that sort of I think of. White city is actually ironic. Now we need to know the figures of speech and what irony is all about. If you think of, we're speaking about White City Jabavu, which is in Soweto, a township in apartheid for black people. And then we have White City. Do you see the irony? Do you see the irony in its name? That alone, the word white city will tell you that it is ironic. What else comes to mind? It's quite unpleasant. It's unhygienic. It's harsh. A nice word, Yusuf, I want you to learn is unrelenting. Go check it up in the dictionary, write it down. Unrelenting, right? Unforgiving, unsanitary, sordid, pollution, infected, disgusting. When you think of a sore, right, probably it's contagious, it's infected, and also revulsion. Do you see how we get these words, Yusuf?
Yes.
You get it from, now, these words, when you study poetry, you have to memorize them, right? We have to memorize them, okay? And you have to learn them, okay?
Yes.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining in. Really appreciate your contribution, Yusuf.
No problem, Imran.
Thanks. And that was Yusuf. Um, now let's carry on. It's smothered our little houses like fish caught in a net. Let's take fish caught in a net, right? Like fish caught in a net. With fish caught in a net, and this I've seen in multiple past papers if abandoned bundle comes up. Smothered, the word smothered, difficulty breathing. And when you actually smother, think about Othello smothering Desdemona with death pillow. There was quite a heaviness, suffocation. And if we understand it that way, oppression, excessive pollution, perhaps, right? If you think of little houses, we think of overcrowding, right? But let's look at the people. They are like fish caught in a net. Think about fish. Think about when you would probably see fish caught in a net. Don't you feel them sorry? Don't you have some sympathy towards them? Because they're trapped and they're helpless, right? And also, the overcrowding could be like fish caught in a net. Think of the sardine run. Durban students joining in, think of the sardine run when it comes to actually catching the sardines on on the East Coast, right? So these words are you're going to see they're actually going to help us, really, really help us when it comes to answering the poetry, right? So here's another non-negotiable. You cannot enter a poetry, a paper two exam, and even a paper one for that matter, without studying the figures of speech. Without studying the figures of speech. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a very nice book that I'm sure all students, a very, very popular book, right? It's a very, very popular book. And just switching on the camera so you can see it. It's actually the English Handbook and Study Guide. And you actually get many, many of these, right? You get many of these books, and it's actually this one here. It's the English Handbook and Study Guide, and you get many of them. I want you to actually go and study and open to the figures of speech, and you have to study all of them, right? I've listed some of them here. It's like a non-negotiable. You cannot get good marks in English if you don't know what a simile is, a metaphor. What's irony? Onomatopoeia. And please, 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 I'm just going to take a second to do this. Let's look at the spelling of onomatopoeia. It's onomato, and people get that part wrong. I want you to repeat after me. Say P-O-E-I-A, P-O-E-I-A. And if you repeat P-O-E-I-A, you'll notice that you'll be of one of very few people on earth to actually know the spelling of onomatopoeia. Spelling really annoys markers. It really does. We don't like it. We don't like it. Okay? Alliteration, assonance, puns, paradox, oxymoron, antithesis, right? When it comes to paradox, oxymorons, and antithesis, they're actually quite linked to each other. I'm actually going to highlight it there, right? We have oxymoron, antithesis, and the paradox. They're actually quite linked to each other, right? Hopefully we'll address it in sort of like future. The similes and the metaphors, I would say, go together. Definitely, the similes and the metaphors go together, right? Satire, irony sort of go together. Together, we have alliteration and assonance, and you must sort of look at the similarities between all of them. Euphemism, hyperbole, different figures of speech, but we have to know them all. Okay, so you cannot enter paper two without knowing your figures of speech. Let's move on. And I have a question for you now. I want you to all think about this, right? What is the very distinct figure of speech in the first stanza? Now, I'm going to go to Muhammad Lahe, and there we have him there. Muhammad, what is the very distinct figure of speech in the first stanza? Can you hear me, Muhammad? Are you there? Perhaps he's not. Let's try.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there we go. How are you, Muhammad?
I'm good, and you?
I'm good, thanks. Let's see if you can answer this question. What is the very distinct part, a figure of speech that you would see in the first stanza? It's staring you in the face.
Is it a comparison?
Yes, definitely. And you know what gave it away? The word as, right? The word as in like.
Yeah.
Now, what we need to understand when
So it's a simile.
technically, similes are comparisons. We get two types of comparisons, similes and metaphors, right? But when it comes to as and like, you basically have to, there should be antennas in poetry. And I want you to check this when it comes to question 5, the unseen poem as well, right? When it comes to the unseen poem. Can you see that the word as is staring you there and it will stare at you in the examination hall? You see it there?
Yeah.
Right. Now, what do we do about that comparison? A simile is a comparison, right? I want you to basically think about it like this. Let me help you understand it like this. Check here. We're going to basically, we need to ask ourselves the question that if it is a simile and we are comparing something, we need to ask ourselves, we are comparing something to something. So I ask you, Mohammed, what are we comparing to what?
The white city, Jabavu, is flowed thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw.
No, I
so
want you.
The pus oozing.
The pus oozing.
Is being compared.
Is being compared to.
The white city, so the morning mist and the chimney smoke.
I want you to try again. Let's look at that properly. The morning mist and chimney smoke of white city Jabavu flowed thick yellow as pus oozing from a gigantic saw. Can you see the word off? Let me show you the word
Yeah.
off. When we use the word off, we're basically adding to something that's quite important, right? It's almost like subordinate, right? It's almost secondary, right? If I say Muhammad of South Africa, what's more important, Muhammad or of South Africa? Muhammad,
Mohammed.
right? So we essentially it's not White City Jabavu, right? But what are we actually comparing it to? It's actually the morning mist, don't you think so?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, but let's look at now the morning mist and chimney smoke, right? Let's look at the morning mist and chimney smoke. We know that morning is an adjective, right? Morning is an adjective. So mist is probably the most important thing, right? Because that's your noun. Chimney is an adjective, and chimney describes the smoke, isn't it? Like a beautiful ball.
Yeah.
So what is being compared to what? Try again. It's not the white city.
So then is it the morning mist and the chimney smoke?
Exactly. But essentially, it's the mist and the smoke, and not so much morning and
Yeah.
chimney because those are just adjectives telling us more about the noun, the mist and the smoke. Understand? And I
Yeah.
hope everyone else logged in can also see that, right? So we need to, and I use, can you see the little equilibrium, the two arrows at the bottom? I want you to do that in paper two. Do that in paper two when it comes to similes and metaphors, and we have to find out properly what is being compared to what. So let's look at this properly, and here's the answer. There we go. There we go. Smoke and mist is being compared to pus oozing from a sore. And that is the essence. That is the simile. That is the comparison in stanza one. Learn something today, Mohammed?
Yeah, I did.
Yes. So just let me recap those tips for you. When we compare, and poets love to compare things to other things, because that's what makes it figurative. That's what makes it interesting. Okay? We need to basically ask ourselves what is being compared to what in the previous slide. And we saw that, right? We saw that earlier on. What is being compared to what? And now we answered and we said smoke and mist is being compared to pus oozing from a gigantic sore. Thank you so much for joining. You one of many from which area, by the way, are you calling? Are you tuning in from?
Northcliffe.
Northcliffe. Well, it's only a pleasure to
Yeah.
have you on the first webinar. Is this your first webinar?
Yeah, it is my first.
Enjoying it?
Yeah, it's interesting, different.
Very different. Okay, stay tuned. Few more tips coming up. Get your pen ready, okay?
Okay.
Okay, that was Mohammed from Northcliffe. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining in um, and answering a few questions. Now, this is top secret. This is the part that I was dying to tell you. This is the part I really, really wanted to emphasize. And I call it master verbs. Look properly. It says indicates, suggests, intensifies, reaffirms, reinforces, has connotations to, conveys, portrays, emphasizes, describes, echoes, highlights. Let's look at those verbs. Can anyone tell me really, why are these verbs so important? Let's see if we can speak to Zainab. Zainab, are you there? Zainab, are you with us?
Gee, I'm here.
There we go. That's Zainab.
Gee, I'm here.
Zainab, can you see the master verbs on screen?
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Gee, I
Can you
can
see the
see the
master?
verbs.
Okay, let's look at them. Indicates, suggests, intensifies, reaffirms, reinforces, has connotations to, conveys, portrays, emphasizes, describes, echoes, highlights. Why are these verbs basically king? Do you know
They are
why?
the king because they are very important regarding questions. So when there's questions in the poetry, when they're asking you the questions, you need to interpret these verbs to answer the question correctly.
Yeah, and these are the verbs that you sort of, it should be like the Bible of answering paper two. I want you to study them. I want you to look at them. If you have your camera phone, please just snap a pic of this. Snap a pic of this right now, what's on your screen, right? I'll give you a few seconds. I want you to learn it. I want you to understand the meaning of it. Because, Zainab, if you do past papers, do you notice that these words come up all the time?
Gee, they do,
Yeah,
and lots of these words come up and stuff like that.
yeah, they come up,
Yes.
they really do come up all the time, right? So I want you to take note of this, and I want you to see how we're going to use these verbs to basically answer a question I'm going to put out to you. Is that okay? Is that okay, Zainab? You still with us? Okay, I think maybe reception areas, reception sort of issues there, but I thank Zainab so much for joining in on the discussion when it comes to the webinar. So I want you to remember these words, right? Master verbs. So how do you write your answer? Let's take this question, and it says comment on the effectiveness of the comparison, right? Of the comparison in the first stanza. And this is a 3-mark question. So we're basically looking at, it's definitely not your level 1 and 2 questions, probably not your level 2 questions, but it's your level 3 question, right? It is your level 3 question. Now let's look at this very, very carefully. Let's look at this carefully and let's ask ourselves, comment on the effectiveness of the comparison. So we identified the comparison. We know exactly what's being compared to what. We've identified that. And those little equilibrium signs will sort of help us, right? So we have the comparison, and we need to say, why is it effective? Why? I want you, now every time you see these questions and you say, why is it effective? I want you to think of Mbuyiseni Ostwilliam Charlie. He is sitting, right? He is sitting writing this poem in the apartheid time. He was born in 1940, by the way, right? In KwaZulu-Natal during apartheid. We know that, right? We know that he worked in Soweto. We know that it's probably the height of apartheid. And he is basically describing the conditions in a township. That's the intention. He wants people to feel and experience. And when you would feel and when you would experience, right? When you would feel and experience exactly what Mbuyiseni asked William Charlie, he sat down and he wrote this poem. We need to say, okay, fine. This is his intention and this is what he wants to get across. Because poets will get their message across by the beauty of the words, the poetic devices. When I say poetic devices basically are your figures of speech. So if you look at it as a 3-mark question, let's see where we're actually going to get the marks. Let's see where we're going to get the marks. We need to actually mention the essence and what the comparison actually is, right? And the comparison is the mixture of smoke and mist, right? And that was being compared to pus coming out of a sore, pus oozing out from a sore. I'm not going to use the word oozing perhaps because it's like we're copying and we're not understanding. So pus coming out of a sore. Now, what if this smoke and mist, think about it in Soweto, this smoke and mist is sort of settling. It envelopes the area, right? And if you think of pus oozing, think about your arm. Look at your arm right now, and pus is sort of oozing out from the sore, right? Pus, pus is oozing out from your sore, and it's sort of spreading on your arm. The smoke in the mist is basically settling on the township. It's settling, it's thick and it's heavy and it's dirty and it envelopes the entire area. White City Jabavu, an area in Soweto. But look at the keywords. Let's look at the keywords, and I'm going to sort of highlight the keywords. We have thick, right? We have heavy. We've sort of mentioned these keywords and where we got that from. Those were the keywords when we actually study. I want you to think of studying poetry like this. Keywords, master verbs, and phrasing it nicely. And dirty, we spoke about it being unhygienic and sordid and dirty. So this graphic and sordid image, right, is effective. Why? Because it suggests that the township is harsh, it's unforgiving, it's unrelenting. That is exactly the essence of why the comparison is there. It's unhygienic. It is unhygienic because it will be quite dirty, it will be quite unhygienic. You would need to clean the pus as soon as possible. And what does the image do? Essentially, why is it there? It emphasizes the horrible living conditions. Look at how many adjectives are there. Look at how many adjectives we have in our answer. And these are all the keywords. Horrible living conditions with connotations. Let's look at this. Pain. When you have a sore in your mouth and on your arm, sometimes it might be painful. Would you suffer? The people in White City, Jabavu at the time are suffering. And when you think of sores and when you think it's disease, it's infectious, people will sort of become infected by the disease. So where did we actually get the 3 marks from? Where did we get the 3 marks from? Let's look at the spotlight. I'm looking at the 3 marks. Comment on the effectiveness. I think the first mark definitely came when we spoke about this first sentence that I'm sort of running through with the red spotlight, right? What the simile actually is. Then we spoke about, and we look how many keywords we use: thick, heavy, dirty, sordid, graphic, harsh, unrelenting, unhygienic, horrible, pain, suffering, disease. And these are the keywords that we need to, and I said, load your answers with keywords. Load it with keywords, and now you can actually see. And when you have an answer like this, I promise you, it makes the markers excited. Think of a marker sitting in a hall in Kempton Park, in Joburg, in some of the big schools, in some of the halls, etc. Right? Just think about them sitting there, and it's tedious. And you mark from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening, and we want answers like that. Yeah. We want answers like that. And when we actually have something like that, answers like this, it excites us, and we definitely look for all of the keywords. And there are so many different ideas mentioned there, and we award ideas. Okay. So that's how you would actually answer when it comes to that. Now, I'm just looking at the time, and there are many tools that I want to teach you, many tips that I want to give you, right? So let's quickly go through the rest. Scavenging dogs draped in red bandanas of blood fought fiercely for a squirming bundle. Yeah, it's definitely a gruesome image. We have ferocious creatures. There's a savage need to survive. Let's look at hunger. The hunger could also mean that people are poor in the township and they also hungry, right? It's about survival of the fittest because we have different dogs fighting fiercely. FF alliteration, fighting fiercely for a squirming bundle. It's about survival of the fittest. And the squirming bundle, it dehumanizes the baby, right? It makes it seem like the baby is worthless. If you have to see dogs fighting over a baby that was alive, would that not send you into horror? Shock horror, right? And when we're saying squirming bundle, it's dehumanizing the baby, making the baby seem worthless and insignificant. It's alive. How would you feel? Take the keywords and tell us. Put it down in paper too. And we want to see, and we want to award marks by keywords and not so much lengthy explanations. I threw a brick, they bade thanks, flickered velvet tongues of scarlet and scurried away, leaving a mutilated corpse, an infant dumped on a rubbish heap. Oh, baby in the mango, sleep well on human dung. So if you look at the first part, before from I to heap, distress. Wouldn't you be distressed, repelled, and disgusted if you saw that? And we are basically calling the baby a corpse. It's unimportant, right? We're making the baby seem worthless and unimportant. It doesn't have a name. It's a thing. The value of human life is basically the value of human life is sort of downplayed, right? It's traumatic. Wouldn't you be traumatic when you see that? Because it's a very savage, sight. Oh, baby in the mango. Now, when you think of baby in the mango, we're thinking about baby Jesus, right? The baby Jesus. And we speak about babies as with innocence, right? Sacred. We know that they are sacred, right? And the sacredness probably goes in very well with Jesus. But this baby sleep well on human dung. Why would the baby sleep well on human dung? Right? It's a victim of circumstance. right? It's not the baby's fault, perhaps, right? Because the child is abandoned on the rubbish heap as a result of man's follies and immoral deeds. It's not the baby's sort of doings, but it is the circumstance, the township, the environment, the time that the baby grew up in, circumstances, and the baby is now left to die on human dung. If we continue, and this is an very important part and stanza in the essay, and the tone just changes. The tone just changes. I have seen an essay, a poetry essay question on an abandoned bundle. And I think if you really want to go and study it, it's from the 2011, November 2011 paper, right? November 2011, the November paper. You can go education.gov.za. You can download the paper there, right? And the essay basically said the poem conveys the speaker's attitude toward and feelings about the mother's actions. We have to critically assess and analyze the mother's role in this. So when we look at this, I sort of think of that the tone is quite gentle. The mother is quite vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? To an oppressive life. To an oppressive life. I also think of pure, right? When we speak about the rays of the rising sun and melting into the rays of the rising sun, glittering with innocence, purity, a new beginning, sympathy, a pristine innocence, a heart as pure as untrampled June. Can the mother be blamed? Right? That is a very wonderful essay. I suggest you go to November 2011 for that. Right? 2011 for that. And that brings us to the end of this session for Matric Poetry with Mr. Imraan Karolia. That's me. In fact, I can just switch on the video one more time. You can see the lighting and what have you. But it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you guys. I hope you really learned a lot. Talking about keywords, talking about the master verbs that we need to learn, and just looking at how the sentences are structured when it comes to actually answering. Because when you use keywords and master verbs, use your keywords and your master verbs, you will absolutely see that it will change your answering of poetry forever, and it will really improve it. It will really improve it. Keywords, master verbs, that's what we learn, and also connect with the words, right? So if from now till maybe the next session you are going to study futility, lake morning in autumn, like I know buffeted pencil slanted rain in lake morning in autumn, for example. I want you to connect with the words and tell me what comes to your mind. Think of the key words, but not elaborate sentences. We're not looking for half a page just to give you 2 marks. Sometimes students write for half a page and we give them 1 mark for a 3-mark question. It's about keywords. It's about being concise. It's about being relevant, keeping it keep it simple, short with all of the keywords. And that's essentially what we're looking for. I want you to look at the screen again. And I'm looking at the screen right now. Right? So what did we do today in the first session, the free session, right? What we actually did, let me just turn myself off, right? There we go. It was the welcome, told you a little bit about me, the poetry webinars and how a webinar actually works. English home language paper 2, we spoke about the problems with answering poetry, and towards the end, the solutions by making reference to an abandoned bundle. Now, just some feedback before you go. In fact, I think we can speak to 1 or 2 more people. We'll just see who has a microphone with them, and we can see if we can cross to them. We can just, let's see if we can get some feedback live. Let's see who we can go to. I'm looking at Amara Nur Muhammad. Amara, are you with us, Amara? Is Amara there? Amara? Okay. Don't know if there's a microphone with her there, but I've sort of unmuted her. Let's go to another Raisa this time. And this is Raisa Dabilia from, I know you from Nigel. How are you? Raisa, are you with us? Raisa? I can hear you. I can hear sort of People at your home, perhaps in the background. Okay, no, that's fine. Let's see if we can perhaps go back to Mohammed, right? Mohammed, are you still with us? Mohammed, are you
Yes,
still?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the time, and that brings us to the end. As mentioned, these sessions are basically not going to teach you a line-by-line analysis because that's what you would have done in class, right? What did you think of this session? What examiners want and how to give examiners what they want? Just your thoughts on what you've learned in the past hour.
I think it was pretty awesome the past hour. This is like the most I've learned in poetry actually this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and
So it's like it's definitely worth it.
yeah, I think the thing is what you need to understand, and there were many things, that we mentioned here, is when we say simile and metaphor, and if we just read simile metaphor and we don't understand what we're comparing to what, then we're not going to get it right. Even for example, in paper one, when they speak about similes and metaphors, possibly in cartoons and adverts, for example, and in even question 5, you know. So
Yeah.
we really need to understand the essence of it. And when we really understand and we get a critical analysis of the figures of speech and really understand it in context by using those equilibrium signs, by using our arrows, by underlining all of the keywords and trying to think of keywords, that will really help us, right? So Mohammed, you and everyone else who's sort of online, when you actually exit and when I log you off, we'll do it all together, right? There is a quick survey, but if you do have sort of the dashboard sheet, sorry, the dashboard sort of that pops up in front of you, I see a poll there. I don't know if you can see the poll. Can you see the poll on your side? It says poll.
No, I can't.
No, you can't. Just see if you click
I can't
on,
see the poll.
if you can click on the screen, right? Just see if you right click, does it give you a few options, or if there's sort of like a file box or something as you view. Can you see that
No,
there?
there's nothing. I'm on the iPad, so I don't know.
Okay, you're on the iPad. Let's see if you can do that. If I've just changed the setting, and you can see the timer now, right? Can you now see the poll? I've just changed a few.
No.
No, you can't. Okay, that's fine. But what you're going to do is when you log out, right? When you log out, you're actually going to complete a quick survey for me and to all of the listeners. Sorry, to everyone who tuned in from around the country. I really want you to complete the survey. There are questions there. If you can be slightly detailed, because it will help me to help you when it comes to future lessons. Is that okay?
Yeah, it should be fine.
Okay, that will be absolutely amazing, right? What we are actually going to do is that I want everyone to sort of go to Imran K blog if you haven't registered, .shaza.co.za. It's on your screen right now. Oh, by the way, Mohammed, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you so much for your contribution on the first lesson. I really do appreciate it.
No problem, Imran.
Okay, thanks. And that was Mohammed. And if I can remember, I think it was Northcliffe. Okay. So we're looking at the sign up on the blog, imrankblog.shaza.co.za. We're looking at perhaps the contact details. You can also go there, imrankblog.shaza.co.za. You can send me an email there. And when we log off, there's going to be a quick survey immediately after class, right? And that's basically what the blog looks like at the moment. You can basically see there's the contact me, tells you a little bit about me. So I'm really interested in your feedback and how we can basically continue. What I want you to do is I want you to tell your friends about perhaps what you've learned, and if it was beneficial to you, maybe it will be beneficial to them. You perhaps you can get your classmates, because you would be on school holidays coming up on Friday, the official school holiday. Some of you are on school holiday for a while. I really hope you are studying. I really hope you have your exam plan in place. And if there's one piece of advice I can give you in closing, is that many matriculants sort of study very hard for trials and sort of drop the ball when it comes to finals, right? So I really want you to 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 study very hard. I know the holidays are coming up, right? So just see if you can I'm just looking at messages coming in. Lots of messages of thanks, right? Lots of messages of thanks coming in. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully we'll keep in touch. So if you haven't signed up, right? If you haven't signed up, I'm just gonna quickly show you here where the sign up form is, right? That part there. If you haven't signed up, I suggest you please do sign up and get your friends to sign up. So from now on, that will be it will be my mode of contact with you on email. Regularly check your emails, and probably we'll keep you up to date with regards to future classes. But what I can tell you for the moment is that there won't be any classes during the holidays, right? The holidays coming up. But if we will continue with this, when it comes to we will continue with this when it comes to the fourth term, just before trials. And on email, you should get a timetable with the sessions. And I really look forward to many, many more of these webinars. So just a few tricks and tips and secrets shared today, and I hope to share more with you in the future. Matriculants, it's been awesome. It's been fun. And if it's new for you, I really, really, really thank you for joining in, supporting the webinars, and we look forward to many, many more fruitful sessions. And I really hope you score really, really high marks and give examiners what they want. From me, Imraan Karolia, English facilitator, and this was also my first webinar with matriculants. Done it before, but with matriculants, it's been absolutely wonderful. I'd like to thank the team assisting me, those who have come for like moral support, my mom, my dad. My dad's been really working hard with this, Uncle Paul. All my students, my own very students, I know I can see some of you are online and many others from across the country. I really hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much. Good greetings to everybody. And we'll see you next time on uh, Imraan Karolia's Matric Poetry, What Examiners Want. Thank you so much. Remember to fill out the CV just now. Goodbye.